Hi, I'm Chelsea Hastings, and you might know me from such films as Summer of 2023, Triads Part 1. Yeah, I know I didn't make the second half, but that's what I'm here doing now, so character development. In the first half, we talked about triads built around stacked thirds. So, for example, major, minor, diminished, and augmented. If you don't remember those or you don't know what they are, highly recommend you go back and watch the first part. It'll make a lot more sense watching this one back, but if you do remember it, today we're going to be talking about sus chords, which is a different kind of triad not built around stacked thirds. I'm really excited because I love sus chords. They're super great. So without further ado, I'm Zika, and this is Music Theory Crash Course. Okay, sus chords. What does it mean? What does sus mean? It's not suspicious. I know we think that's what it is. It is not suspicious. Sus in this context actually stands for suspension. What does suspension mean in a musical context? Well, you can think about it kind of in the same way you would think about suspension in a normal context. So you have one note and it is suspended until it can resolve down. In music, usually you're moving between two chords and one of the notes from the previous chord is held over before it can eventually resolve down. So what's an example of this? I put us in the key of G major just because it's pretty simple. And here I've voiced what is considered the 4 chord, which is in C major. It's in second inversion or first inversion. And we've got C, E, and G in this chord. But we want to get it to a 1 chord, which would be a G chord, right? So what do we need to voice a G chord? We need G, B, and D. Sweet. So now that we know that, we can start resolving this chord. We're going to take the E, take it down to a D, take the G, carry it across, take this E, also bring it down, and then usually you would take this C, put it down on the B. But what if you want a fun, snazzy suspension? Well, you can keep this C, carry it over here, like that, so it stays, and then after like a beat or so, resolve it down so that we've got a fully voiced G. Does that make sense? That's what we mean by suspension. And so the end result ends up being a completely separate chord with 3 members, but only 2 of the chord members are of the original chord, which can make it somewhat confusing. Let's talk about that a little more. Okay, so we've kind of understood the basics of how sus chords work. Let's dive a little bit more into it. So we know that one of the notes of the triad will be suspended before it can resolve down. But which note is it? Well, it is almost always going to be the 3rd. So the 3rd middle note of your triad is going to be suspended either up or down. First, let's focus on resolving the 3rd down. So if we're back in kind of a G major chord, so G, B, and D, that's how it would look normally. How would it look if the 3rd was suspended up, right? You take the 3rd, you put it up a note. So now you have G, C, D. And I'll play examples of how these two sound differently in a second. Okay, does that make sense? We can kind of hear the difference here between, sorry for the noise by the way, we can kind of hear the difference between the suspension and the regular major triad. Sweet, but what if you were going to suspend the middle note underneath? So keep the 2 outside notes, but just move the 3rd one down. That's still technically considered a suspension. At least I would. That's a terrible drawing, but you get it. Put it down. And I'll play you some examples of that now. Okay, so now we kind of understand how we get to the point of calling it a suspension in classical context, and also how suspensions kind of look like on their own, solo, without any previous chord to go off of. But what about in pop context? Because we talked about how it works in classical context with cadences and things like that. But how does it work if you're just trying to play chords like on their own in a pop context instead of, like, say, reading sheet music? Well, let's talk about it. Let's take this G chord, right? Let's say, put it up on the C, like that. Hope you can see that. So here we've got, this is a G, a C, and a D. So we're suspending the middle chord, or the middle note, the B, up to a C. How would you write this in pop chord symbols? Or read this? You would read this as G, sus, and then since you're suspending the middle note, the third, up to the fourth, you say G, sus, 4. Cool, sweet. But what if you wanted to do a chord something like that? Then you would write it, let's just do the same chord, like that. So you've got your G, your A, and a D, right? You would write this as G, sus, and since your third is now sitting on the second, you're gonna call it G sus 2. Beautiful, now you know how to read pop chord symbols. And this applies to any bottom note. So it essentially just means that you're building a fifth, top and bottom note, and adding whatever that middle note is. Make sense? I'll play you some more examples of sus chords now. Okay, hopefully that all made sense. If you have any questions, please feel free to let me know. Put it in the comments below and I'll talk about them if you want me to. That's just a very general, brief overview of suspension chords, and have fun using them in your own music. I use them all the time on their own. Yeah, have any questions, contact me. If not, have a lovely day. I'm Zika. This was Music Theory Crash Course. Good night.